How long will we need fossil energies? With us today is Ronald Stein, author, columnist, and founder of PTS Advance. Good morning, Ronald Stein. It's a pleasure, very good pleasure for you.
Armando, glad to be aboard.
Thank you. Let's go to the first point, please. There is a very emotional discussion about energies in the world, not only in the US, Europe, and Brazil too, involving renewables, the end of fossil energies. So the question is the end of the oil, gas, and coal age?
Well, I think we need to rearrange the discussion and not talk about energy. Talk about one of two things, either electricity or the products that are supporting humanity. Because today, everybody thinks that wind and solar is going to solve our energy problems. But wind and solar only are going to solve our electricity problems if they can, because they can only generate electricity. They want to replace fossil fuels, but wind and solar can manufacture absolutely nothing for humanity. We learned in the 1900s when oil, came into our existence that oil by itself is useless. It's black gold, it's dirty. Very few people have ever seen it or touched it. But we learned how to make something out of it. And going through a refinery, we've been able to manufacture different grades of fuel for trucks and cars and ships and airplanes and, rocket launches. And we've learned to use the light ends, quote, the oil derivatives, that are now used by all the other infrastructures that make products. And so today we have like more than 6,000 products from oil and fuels that fuel like 50,000 merchant ships moving products all over the world and 50,000 jets, moving products and people all around the world. But wind and solar is only electricity. And so the renewables is electricity. It's not going to solve our energy problem. We got to stop using the word energy. Talk about electricity or talk about products and try and solve one of those two questions.
But yeah, electricity is not an energy itself. Come from some energy source, primary energy source. No.
Well, exactly. And if you take a step back and look at it, everything that needs electricity is made with fossil fuels. Your iPad can be charged with electricity, but wind and solar cannot make your iPad. The defibrillator in the hospital, you need electricity to run it, but you need fossil fuels to make it. Take your EVs, same type thing. You need electricity to run it, but the EV vehicle, all vehicles, 100% made with fossil fuels, from the plastics, the electronics, the rubber, the tires. Trying to identify something in a vehicle that's not made with fossil fuels.
It's interesting because I remember an interview that I saw of you and someone from California. I don't know who exactly. Quote: "Oil derivatives are the basis of more than 6,000 products in our daily lives." End quote. And my question
Exactly.
is: are there alternatives for petrochemical products are other than petroleum derivatives source?
Armando, that's the challenge. Like I say, we've had 200 years we've been, quote, refining oil. And like any product that comes up, it's usually we can clone it or duplicate it or replace it. We've been trying to find a replacement for fossil fuels. Hey, I'm all for getting rid of fossil fuels, but show me a backup plan before I jump out of the airplane without a parachute. And right now we're developing recycled plastic. I mean, there are steps being made, but it's slow, and there's so many products that are coming out of fossil fuels. Because when you take a look at it, a couple hundred years ago when oil came into our lives, the population of the world was 1 billion. And now it's 8 billion. In 200 years, we've grown to 8 billion
Going to
people.
going to 10.
Yes, yes. And, like I say, the wealthy countries, we enjoy, take a look in your house, your workplace, all the stuff that's there and trying to identify something that was not made with fossil fuels. It's made our life much more pleasurable to live with. We have a medical industry that did not exist before 1900. Electronics didn't exist. You know, interestingly, when the pandemic hit, you know, I said, ironically, it happened at the best time of history because when it happened, we had the technology to work remote, to educate remote, you know, with Zoom and everything else. If the pandemic hit, you know, like 20 years ago, it would have shut down the world because we didn't have that electronic technology to do that. And so, yeah, you know, you want to get rid of fossil fuels? We'll end this discussion right here because you could turn in the iPads and the iPhones.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Ronald, quote your mention: unreliable electricity like that from wind turbines and solar panels only generates electricity. And my point is for you: why are these truths not clear to the society? What's the reason that's not clear? And well, speak. Let's see. Explain it to the society.
Well, the elites that are initiating the regulations are just confused and don't understand and are unwilling to have a discussion because they talk about energy. But energy is two things. Like I say, it's electricity and products, and you can't combine them together. And you know, I'd love to have a discussion with Joe Biden. I'd like to have a discussion with AOC because, you know, you want all electricity. Joe Biden, he's flying around in a 400-ton airplane, 100% made with fossil fuels, all the electronics and all the seating and, you know, everything that's in the plane. It's powered by jet fuel to keep it up in the air. And he's screaming in the microphone, we're going to get rid of fossil fuels. My God, you know, I guess the only good thing about getting rid of fossil fuels, you would ground Air Force One.
It's a very big plane. Yeah, yeah, impressive.
You know, when I travel, you know, take a look, you know, if you're traveling on a ship, you know, take a step back and take a look. Wow, you're going to move this thing? And the airplane. In fact, I'm amazed. You know, my office is pretty close to the Orange County Airport in Southern California. And the planes are, you know, approaching, and they're, you know, about 500 feet in the air when they pass by the office. I'm an engineer. I look at it, I said, damn, how the hell is that goddamn thing staying up in the air, you know? And like I say, it's just amazing. And, you know, wind and solar is going to solve the world's problem? No. Like I say, it might reduce emissions temporarily in certain locations, but no, electricity by itself is not it. We got to have a discussion. And like you say, you know, I think I mentioned to you before, when I give a presentation, I don't like to give a presentation. I like to have a fireside chat. Yeah. And I'll provide the moderator, I'll provide the audience with 50 open-ended questions on energy because everybody is embarrassed to ask an intelligent question on energy.
Yes.
And so I'll give it to them. And if they want to talk about wind or solar or EVs or nuclear, you know, whatever, oil production, shipping, whatever, you know, let them initiate the question. It's open-ended, so I can elaborate on it. And my answer usually generates more questions, but it's got to be a discussion. But anytime, you know, the politicians talk, they're talking into a microphone. It's a one-sided conversation. And I've lost total confidence in the press because they won't ask any questions. They just transcribe what is said into the microphone. Yes. And it's, like I say, it's ironic because if
with pre-prepared speech and scripts that the people that support them give to them to repeat.
Well, exactly, right. And I know they got the presidential, you know, discussion debates coming up. And to me, that's kind of bogus because they're given the questions ahead of time. There's no surprise questions. It's not a conversation. So they have months to prepare for it. And it's bogus. Like I say, there's got to be a conversation. Hey, like I say, I'm all for getting rid of fossil fuels. Just give me your backup plan. How are you going to keep the product supply chain going? that's keeping our 8 billion people alive and well.
Yeah. But exactly in this point, so let's see the other side of the game. So, how do you see the climate threats and the Earth's temperature being out of control? Is something true? And
No,
is
no,
no.
no. There's, the Earth was a lot hotter in previous years. I think recently in the 20s and 30s, we had a lot of heat, a lot of fires in the United States, and CO2 levels. Everybody's concerned about CO2 levels. CO2 levels today are getting close to what I call CO2 starvation. CO2 is around 400, 420. In the past, it's been like 20 times higher, but you get CO2 down to like 150, humanity cannot exist. I mean, that would be life goes away. CO2 is life. I mean, it provides. Take greenhouses. They artificially increase CO2 to grow the plants faster. And yeah, CO2 is basically a source of life. And I'm not sure why people are so gung ho about reducing CO2 because we're getting close to CO2 starvation. When you take a look at the CO2 levels throughout the history of mankind, it was up in the 2,000, 5,000 range. Now it's down in the 400 range. And so no, and you take fossil fuels. The reason we populated from 1 to 8 billion is we've eliminated about 99% of the fatalities from weather. People are not dying from heat and cold anymore. If it's hot, we have air conditioning, and if it's cold, we got, clothing and heating. And yeah, like you say, 99% of the weather-related fatalities have been eliminated with the products we have today. And, the medicines and the technology, it's everything we have today is made with fossil fuels. And like I say, I'm all for getting rid of fossil fuels, but before you turn that spigot off, what's your replacement? Because you got the whole world relying on these 6,000 products. And, the industry, there's like 700 refineries throughout the entire world that are manufacturing the fuels and the oil derivatives that makes all these products. And the industry is under tremendous pressure. In fact, so much pressure that in the next 5 years, they're projecting 20% of the refineries to shut down. Armando, that's 140 manufacturers shutting down. At the same time, the developing countries are demanding more and more as they come out of their poverty situation. So you got increased demand and decreased supply.
Yeah.
Whoa, I mean, the law of supply and demand, you can't change the law of supply and demand. If you basically reduce the supply, increase the demand, you got shortages and inflation in perpetuity.
No doubt. And another point is the contingency, because the intermittence of some source, we need to put natural gas to support this shortage.
Right, and natural gas is classified into one of those fossil fuels. So people want to get rid of fossil fuels. Well, natural gas gets caught in that. Take coal. China and India, they're building like coal-fired power plant almost every day, and because coal, it's abundant, it's reliable, it's inexpensive, and they have no money. The world's got 8 billion people, and 80% of the world, which is more than 6 billion, they're living on less than $10 a day.
Oh my God.
It's the wealthy countries, the United States, Germany, Australia, the UK. These countries represent like 4% of humanity. Emissions are going to be driven by the developing countries, China, India, Africa. And yeah, we can't solve their problem. And like I say, we're wealthy. We can afford this stuff. Living on $10, they can't subsidize themselves out of a paper bag.
No.
And the separation between the wealthy and the less fortunate is getting further and further apart because we're making it so expensive.
And Ronald, why California is so different from other states in the United States, and similar to France and other countries I know, but Texas and California, for instance, they are in the opposite position in terms of
Well, here in California, we're a dictatorship here. We only have one party, the Democrats, and you know, Gavin Newsom went through a recall, and he survived a recall, and his head went from this size to this size, and now he can do anything. He is God, and he's got the public supporting him, and that's the thing that amazes me. I remember that movie long time ago. I forget who was in it, but he was spouting, "I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it any longer." I keep thinking the public, there's 40 million people here in California, and the elite are buying EVs and, you know, passing the regulations. But most of the people in California are basically poor. And I'm thinking that at some point in time, they got to say, "I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take this any longer," because we're driving up the cost of, you know, Germany was the first country to go green. Today, they got the highest cost of electricity in the world. The United States is right, California's right behind them. In California, we got the highest cost of electricity in the country, highest cost of fuel in the country, and that drives up the cost of everything. Cost of bananas, cost of lumber, and their rent goes up. And, you know, when I gas up my car, you know, I could easily put in, you know, $80 to $100 in my gas tank. And my first thought is, you know, okay, I can afford it, but for the person flipping burgers, they can't afford it. They're trying to pay rent, utilities, you know, get medication for their family, and yeah, and you know, they don't have an extra $80 every week or two to, you know, put in their gas tank.
But you mentioned Germany, but Germany was a result of the confusion, the geopolitical confusion with Russia, NATO, Ukraine, or is something like California that's a kind of mindset?
Yes. And, you know, I'm not sure how they got started, but, you know, they wanted to get rid of fossil fuels. Not only get rid of fossil fuels, they got rid of nuclear too. And now the only thing they have is wind and solar. And the wind's not blowing, they're in deep trouble. And coal, yeah. And so, and then, you know, here in California, you know, we too, you know, want to get rid of nuclear. We shut down one nuclear plant in Diablo Canyon. Gavin Newsom needed some votes, so he gave it an extra 1 or 2 years to stay online. But it's going to go down, and we're going to be relying on, you know, wind and solar. You know, the thing is, they provide all these subsidies and incentives to wind and solar based on their nameplate rating. But the nameplate rating is bogus because they don't work most of the time. You know, if you take, you know, a coal-fired power plant, natural gas power plant, nuclear power plant, whatever their nameplate rating is, they're going to generate that 24/7 all year long, probably 97% of the time they're operating. But wind and solar only operate about 20% of the time. And they get all the funding based on the nameplate rating. So if they're going to build 100 megawatts of electricity, they get funding for that. Well, I think they should be penalized if they don't deliver that much. And because, like I say, they're down most of the time, and it's like I say, the public's paying for it. And you know, you can't, you know, operate an emergency room on intermittent electricity. It's like I say, it's horrendous. And like I say, there's no discussions because, you know, all the politicians are all drinking the same Kool-Aid. You know, Armando, it really gets down, even to colleges. Professors, you know, doctors, and they're required to do, you know, documents, literature, research. And if they seek funding for a project they want to do that the world's coming to an end, they'll get funding for it. If they basically say that, you know, the world cannot survive without fossil fuels, they're not going to get funding. So it's kind of like it feeds itself. You know, I like to say, Governor Newsom and Joe Biden, they provide a lot of material for me because every time they open their mouth, I've got to write another article. And And they surround themselves with people that think like them. If they don't agree with them, they're not invited to the party. And I think that's the same reason that the press is afraid to ask questions, because if they put these people in an embarrassing position, they're not going to be invited to the next interview. And so it's like I said, it's
Very
kind of
good
like
one.
it's feeding upon itself.
Yeah, yeah, very good. Okay, going to our conclusions, and you can make them. But first, let me try a thought. If you agree or not agree, it makes sense for you. It's not about being for or against renewables, but taking in consideration volumes, functions, utility, energy density, thermodynamics, and benefits, of course. Does it make sense for you? And please go to the conclusions.
Well, I think when people talk about the transition we're trying to make, first thing you got to keep in mind, we got 8 billion people on this earth, and they're relying on a supply chain of products that did not exist a couple hundred years ago. You know, the medications, the tires, the space program, the merchant ships, water filtration. The water filtration is probably the number one thing the world needs is water filtration and sanitation systems. And like say, electricity can make the pumps run, but it can't build the equipment. And asphalt for the roads, fertilizers that are all made with natural gas,
Plastic.
the pesticides. We got to feed the world, and wind and turbines and solar panels can't make any of that stuff. And so keep in mind that how are you going to maintain the supply chain of products that the 8 billion are living on right now? I mean, the logistics are unbelievable. To think about that, 50,000 merchant ships, 50,000 jets,
Wow,
going, all the time. And, electricity is going to basically ground them all. It would stop it all. I think if we got rid of fossil fuels today before we have a replacement, that'd be the greatest tragedy to humanity. I mean, we would lose a couple billion people almost instantaneously from, to be dying from diseases, malnutrition, like you say, we won't be able to feed them, won't be able to keep them healthy. And it's like you say, it's something that's the subject I think we want to talk about first, is the supply chain of products. How are you going to maintain that? You really got to focus on what's the replacement. In New York, the city of New York, one of the state senators initiated a legislative act to stop the transition until they identify a replacement for fossil fuels. Because, everything that in the transition, be it wind and solar and EV, they're all made with fossil fuels. And so you're cutting your nose off to spite your face. If you get rid of fossil fuels, you'll be eliminating wind turbines and solar panels and EVs and airplanes and everything else. And so, I would like the discussions to be geared around, don't talk about energy, talk about the product supply chain.
Supply chain.
Supporting humanity.
Very good approach, very good approach. As a friend of ours, thanking for this sanity discussion.
And that's the goal. My focus is energy literacy, and I try and do all my op-eds, 3 books I've written. The latest one, Clean Energy Exploitation. It was exciting. It was nominated for Pulitzer Prize because it brought transparency to the fact that all the exotic minerals and metals to build EV batteries, to build wind turbines, solar panels, are coming from developing countries like China, India, and Africa. And they have no environmental controls, no labor controls. You have kids mining for this stuff by hand. And it's morally and ethically, I think, unacceptable. I think I mentioned to you in the past that I've made a personal decision. I won't buy an EV for ethical and moral reasons, because I know where that lithium and cobalt is coming from, and I'm not willing to financially support that. The government is, they provide, here's incentives, here's tax breaks, to buy your EV, to build the wind turbine. They're providing financial incentives for these developing countries to continue exploiting people that have yellow, brown, and black skin. And I think that's morally and ethically unacceptable. That's my personal opinion.
Good. Was a great pleasure having Ronald Stein. I hope you can accept other invitations for specific discussions, but this
Yes.
one was great, the first one we had. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Armando, fantastic. You have a great day.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye. Have a good day.